Thank you guys for joining us today. Today we're going to be going over Zoom and some of the features that you can use excuse me, with your students in your classroom. And we're going to kind of dive into some of the features that we have now that we have our district accounts.
And so the first thing we wanted to cover is just activating your new district paid account. So to activate, you should see an email that would be in your Gmail, so your turlockusd.org email. In there, you're going to see a big blue button you're going to want to click, and that's going to take you to Zoom, where you'll be able to activate your new Zoom account.
So for those of you who don't know, Zoom is a platform that we can use to connect with our students and our families. It's face-to-face communication. It is a web conferencing tool that, like I said, we can use to facilitate collaboration and support learning in the classroom.
So we're going to go over some features that you would see in Zoom. So the very first feature would be in the upper right-hand corner, and that allows you to toggle between gallery view and speaker view. Gallery view, you'll be able to see all the tiles, and speaker view, you're going to be able to see just the person who's talking, or if there's two people, it'll pick the one that's louder. Then on the bottom left-hand corner, this is where you get your audio controls. This is actually really important because now we all have that new monitor. Mm-hmm. So if you have a separate speaker system in your room, there's a little up arrow right next to that mute button. You'll want to click on that up arrow and you'll be able to choose the audio that you want. You'll be able to choose the microphone from your new monitor, which is called Echo. And then you'll be able to choose either the speaker system that you have. Some of you, your classrooms are like you have these big surround sound speakers. Some of you have your own personal ones. So you'll be able to choose what you have in there. The next one is the video controls. This is also really important since we have our new monitor. The stop video turns your video off and on, but that up arrow next to the video, this also allows you to choose what camera you want. And since many of us have our document camera hooked up to our computer, we need to tell Zoom to either pick up the document camera or to pick up our new webcam. So if you hit that up arrow there, you'll be able to access what camera you want, whether it's the new monitor or your document camera, and also some other features like virtual background, and there's one that makes your complexion look nice, and then just some other features that you can toggle through in the options.
I was talking to a teacher the other day and they said that they used the new complexion thing and they're like, it worked super good. So
oh, it's fantastic. The security button, I call this my favorite button. This enables you to lock your meeting, enables you to put the waiting room on. So if when you scheduled your meeting, you forgot to check the box for waiting room, you can do it right through the meeting. And then it also gives you some controls with the students. So you can take away the student's ability to screen share. If there's a check next to it, that means you're allowing the students to do this activity. So right here in this example, I'm allowing the students to screen share, I'm allowing them to use the chat, I'm allowing them to rename themselves, and I'm allowing them to unmute. If I don't want them to unmute themselves, I would uncheck it. If I don't want them to rename themselves, I would uncheck it. If they're going on the chat and they're writing things that are inappropriate, I would uncheck that, all from the security. So the security is a really great tool to help us manage when we're inside of Zoom. Polling. Polling is a new feature that we have with our new accounts. There are still some things that Marshall and I are working out and trying to figure out since we just got the activation. But in order to access the polling, you'll have to go into your settings in your zoom.us website, and you'll click on the settings and you'll be able to activate them there. The next one is participants. This is a very important tab that you always want to have open anytime you're in your Zoom meeting. When you're in your Zoom meeting in the participant tab, this is where you'll be able to see your students that are in the waiting room that will show up, so you'll be able to admit them. And this is where you'll also be able to explain to students where to go for raising their hand or doing other reactions. And another wonderful feature of the participant tab is when you open it up, you'll be able to mute all of your students right away with one button, or unmute all of your students right away with one button. And then the next one is chat. So chat's another thing that you should always have open when you are running a Zoom meeting. When you click on participants and chat, participants will be at the top and your chat box will be at the bottom. So it's really a great way for your students to communicate. That way they can communicate face-to-face, or they can type and communicate in the chat. So we're reaching all of our students. And then we have breakout rooms. So if you don't see breakout rooms or polling or any of the other features that you wanted on the bottom of your screen, you'll want to make sure that you visit zoom.us and go into your settings on the left-hand side, and you'll want to enable that feature. Breakout rooms is great because that's what's going to allow you to actually move students into separate rooms, and we're going to expand on that in a little bit. And then exit meeting, make sure when you leave the meeting that you say end meeting for all, and it kicks all of your students out, and that would be the end of your class.
Okay, so we talked about some features, but let's kind of dive into some more features. So sharing your screen, so you can show your students what's on your screen, kind of like how we're doing right now. I'm showing you what's on my screen. You can also share your document camera. You can have students follow along while you're writing, doing a math problem, something like that underneath your document camera. Breakout rooms, which we talked about, you are putting students in certain groups. You can hold intervention times. You can do partner sharing, those types of things within your breakout rooms. Zoom does have a whiteboard feature, so you can enable the whiteboard and you can draw with your mouse or your trackpad, or if you have a touchscreen, which we all have the touchscreen Chromebooks, you can use your touchscreen to kind of draw on the whiteboard as well. We talked about polling. You can have them, you can ask questions. This is something that you can set up previously, so you can ahead of time you can kind of already have questions preloaded, or if you wanted to ask questions in real time on the fly, you can do that as well through polling. And then chat, you can have students type in the chat, you can have them discuss with each other, you can have them answer questions. Those types of things can be utilized within the chat.
So the very first thing you want to do if you're brand new to Zoom, getting started, is you want to go to zoom.us and create your account. And you're going to want to log in with Google. If you haven't done this, if you check your Gmail account and you have an email from Zoom to activate, you can just go ahead and hit activate your account, and you would create your account that way.
And then after you've logged in and you created your account, you want to make sure that you go to the settings tab that's going to be on the left-hand side underneath where you have profile, you have meetings, recordings, and settings. You want to make sure you go to the settings, and you want to make sure that you carefully go through the settings and you turn on features that you want to have enabled and turn off features that you don't want to have enabled. So making sure things like weight room, those types of things are enabled. Just making sure that you kind of get familiar with some of the features that are in and some of the settings that you have within your Zoom account.
And then the third step overall when we look at Zoom is you want to be able to schedule your classes. So you want to click on schedule a meeting, and then the window is going to come up as it shows, and you're going to want to type in the topic. The topic is just the name of the class. Under that, there's a description. You can type a description in here if you want, but it isn't needed. At the when, what Marshall and I are recommending is that you put in the last day of school. The reason for this is because you can keep using that room multiple times. And if you do reoccurring, you can only create rooms up until October. So then you'd have to constantly be creating those rooms, and reoccurring gives you many Zoom sessions all day. So if you were an elementary teacher and you're doing a reoccurring meeting, you would have 182 meetings that would show up essentially. And if you are a secondary teacher, you would have all 6 periods that you teach a day times 5 for, times 182 for every single day, times 5 days a week. It'd be a lot of meetings to sort through. Yeah. So in order to kind of cinch that down, we're recommending that when you put in the topic and you create your class, that you put in the last day of school, and then you type in the password and make sure the waiting room is checked. The waiting room box is right next to the password.
And then we also want to kind of hit on adding alternative hosts. So this is something that you would utilize, like if you're going to have a sub and you need them to run a Zoom meeting for the day, you're going to add them as an alternative host. We are currently working on getting our subs set up in Zoom and everything, but this is where you would go to add that person as your alternative host for the day.
So this is an example for our recommendations of how to set up your Zoom sessions for elementary. This is one example. So you could set up your day to mirror what you would do in your classroom. So in the morning, for example, this is showing that they're going to do English. And then after that at 10:30, then there's math. Then at 12, science, social studies, MTSS. And then in the late afternoon, ELD, music, art, PE, enrichment. So these meetings for elementary made by each subject can help track your students that are present throughout the day or students that you need to follow up with. So depending on how you want to organize and categorize your day, you can use Zoom in order to mirror what you do normally in the classroom.
And then this is another way that you can set it up as an elementary teacher. You can set it up as just one meeting that you run all day. So you started at 8:30 in the morning, and then that meeting just runs all day, and students, join, and then they exit when it's break time, and then they come back. And so they're just coming back and forth all day. So it all depends on how you want to have it set up and how you want to track things throughout the day.
For secondary, we definitely recommend this. This is a secondary example. So you have all your periods listed. And the meeting date, if you look at the first column, the start time, it's the last days of school. And you'll see that there's first period all the way through sixth. The meeting IDs are all different. So this is how you know that you have completely separate rooms for all of your students. Since the meeting IDs are different, the passwords are also different. So you want to make one session per class, per semester, or per quarter. So you could do this per quarter if you want, or if your classes are semester long, then definitely don't make the end date the end of the year. And then you just change that start meeting to when it works out for you. And this is what your day looks like. So to start any of these meetings, you would just go to your Zoom and you would hit start for first period. And then when second period comes around, you'd log back into your account, hit start for second period, third period, and so on.
And then if you did reoccurring meetings, instead of having one first period, you would have 182 first periods and then 182 second periods. And it would just, as us as the educators, it would get real convoluted and real confusing. So this way it's nice and clean for us. And then for the students, they only have to remember one link, one password as well. So we kind of talked about this, why not reoccurring meetings? So that's, like we talked about, it's going to create a new meeting each day for each session or for each subject or for each period. So it's just going to be way too convoluted, way too confusing, it's going to clog up your Zoom meeting section. So setting the meeting date for the last day of the year is just going to really simplify things and just make it cleaner on your end. And like we said, if you're a secondary teacher and you want to do it by quarter, then have it set for the last day of the first quarter. And then when second quarter starts, you'll set it for the end of the second quarter and so on.
And you can, if you want to do reoccurring meetings, you definitely have that choice. That's what, these are just our recommendations for how to set up the meetings.
Yes. Okay, so let's look at some of the settings. Let's take a deep dive into some of the settings. So once you go through the settings once, you don't have to go through them again. So once you toggle on wait room and those types of things, you don't have to go through and set it each time you create a meeting.
So here's just a big list. This is a little overwhelming. We're going to get into some of the most important settings later on. But if you don't see something, or you do see something and you don't want it, you're going to want to go into your settings. And any changes that you do in your settings will update to your next meeting. So if you're in a meeting currently and you go there and you change something, you're not going to see it instantly. You'll have to leave the meeting and come back in. So one of those settings would be waiting room. You want to make sure that that's turned on. The host video, so that's you as a teacher, you want to make sure that that's always on. The student video, make sure it's on, just so they don't have to try to figure out how to turn it on when they start the meeting. The chat, we definitely recommend that that is on, just so that we're allowing all of our students multiple modes of communication. Private chat, turn that off because we can't regulate that as teachers. Sound notification, that means when someone leaves the meeting or enters the meeting, it plays a little jingle. Definitely have that on. That way you know when your kids are going in and out. Breakout rooms, turn it on. Even if you don't use it, you still at least will have it down on your bottom bar. Co-host, this is great if you have a student teacher or a para or another teacher come in your room. Show windows, so show Zoom windows during screen share, have that on. The screen share button, have that on. That allows you to actually be able to screen share. So if you don't see a big bright green button when you're in your Zoom meeting that you've created, it's because you need to enable that setting. Desktop screen share for users, turn that off. So that allows you to have the option to actually share your desktop to show your students everything. Whiteboard, have that feature on. Nonverbal feedback, we definitely want that on to give our students different modes of communicating. And then the chat came up right at the end. Polling. So polling, we want to have that feature on.
And so here are some more settings that kind of your must-haves that we're talking about here. So requiring a password to schedule a meeting, this is going to be something that will be on by default. So they have to enter a password to get into your meeting. You want to, when you're going through your settings, you want to make sure that you have the turn off embedded password in the link. You want to make sure that you turn that off, because if you have that on, all they have to do is click the link and then they don't have to actually enter the password. So you want to make sure that that's turned off, so they have to enter the password to get into your Zoom session. And then having the join from a browser link on is nice, because then they don't have to have the app downloaded or anything. They can just join from their browser. So that gives them another option to join your Zoom meetings. We did notice that on a Chromebook, it used to be a little bit more predominant in the middle of the page. Now this join from a browser link is small at the bottom, so you might have to kind of point that out to your kids, but it is still there.
And then some more settings, must-haves. Join before host, we want to turn that off. So that means that your students are allowed to get in that meeting before you're there. And we usually don't allow them in our classrooms if we're not in there. So we definitely want to have that off. Waiting room, you want to have that turned on. And that's something that if you forget to turn on, my favorite button, the security button, does allow you to enable that right away. And allow students to rejoin. If you kick students out, you don't want them to rejoin, then that one needs to be turned off. And the reason why that's an option is because sometimes, we even have our students, when we were back in our brick and mortar classrooms, they would walk in even when we didn't have them, and we would have to be like, no, go to your next period. You're not in this class right now. So that's little area in the settings where it says allow students to rejoin after you've kicked them out. We want to have that off. That way they don't keep trying to come back in when it's not their class period.
And then there is a way that you can kind of customize the waiting room. So right now, if you were to join a meeting and you're in the waiting room, it's just going to be basically a white screen, and it's going to say like waiting for host to activate. But what you can do is you can add an image to that. So what some teachers are doing is they're creating their Bitmoji classroom image, and they're putting some messages there. So maybe when their students join the wait room, they might have a message there that says, for this period or for this session, make sure you have these materials, or make sure that you have, these settings turned on or whatever. So it's just kind of a fun way to relay some information to them, and them just not sitting looking at a white screen while they're waiting to join your session. And so to do that, when you're in your settings, you're going to have the wait room toggled on, and then underneath that, where it says wait room options, you want to click on customize wait room. And then after you do that, you're going to be given this option where it's going to allow you to add a logo, which is basically just adding an image. And then you can add a description to this image as well. So then you can upload any type of image here. You can customize the message here. So by default, it just says, please wait, the meeting host will let you in soon. But you can click the little pencil and you can customize that to say whatever type of message you would like. And then once you have everything set up the way you want, and you can close that. And then once students join your sessions and they're put into the wait room, they'll be greeted with the picture that you embedded in there and your customized message, instead of just a white screen that says, please wait, the host will let you in soon.
And then one thing I just want to add about that is any image that you put in the waiting room, it is not interactive. That means it is a standalone image. So if you put an image of your Bitmoji classroom, it's just going to be an announcement. So you can put your Bitmoji classroom in there with something written on the whiteboard or your chalkboard, or a picture that just says like, thank you for being here. This is what we're going to do. But just remember that anything that you put in here, if you only leave your students in the waiting room for half a second, they're not going to have time to read it. So maybe just have it be a welcoming message and not something too important, just in case they're not in there long enough to read it.
And if you have, like Sitar said, if you have your Bitmoji classroom picture here, but the one that you made is, hyperlinks out to different websites and stuff, that's not going to work here. This is just a static image. There's no hyperlinks or anything like that. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're customizing your waiting room.
So one thing about the Manage Participants control is when you click Manage Participants, there's some controls that you'll be able to do right next to students. And so if you were to hover over someone's name, or even if you had multiple teachers in there, even during a PLC meeting, you can make co-hosts and make other people the hosts. You can allow someone to record. If you decided to enable a setting in Zoom for closed captioning, you can assign someone to type closed captioning for you. You can also rename someone or tell them to rename them. You can put them in the waiting room so they get a little timeout. There's those options. Or maybe you had the waiting room because you said, okay, you need to get your books out before you come in, before I accept you. You have 5 minutes. They came in and they're like, oh, I need more time. I need to get my stuff. So you put them back in the waiting room before they're there, because you're doing some kind of timed assessment. But there's a lot of options there that we just wanted to point out just within the participant controls tab as well.
And then now we're going to kind of jump into breakout rooms and how to use breakout rooms. So after you've enabled the breakout room setting in settings, you're going to hold your Zoom meeting, and then you're going to see the option at the bottom for breakout rooms. So it's either going to look like the image on the left where it has like the 4 squares next to each other and it's titled breakout rooms, or you might have to go to the more section and then click on breakout rooms.
And then how to use breakout rooms. You can create these breakout rooms manually and assign and move students. So when you click on the symbol, a box pops up and it asks you how many classrooms, how many breakout rooms do you want? So that's essentially how many groups do you want with your students. So if you normally have 9 groups in your classroom with 4 students in each group, you can replicate that here. So you could change that 1 to a 9. Then it's going to ask you if you want to automatically put students into groups or if you want to manually assign them. Since we don't know a lot of their levels right now, we don't know their personalities. In the beginning, we might automatically assign them, but then we could manually assign them later on. So once we do that, you'll see a screen that kind of looks like this with the little movie. So this is a movie that when you get the copy of these slides, you can pause it and rewind it and go through it. You can rename the breakout rooms. You can assign students individually. You can open all the rooms, close all the rooms. You can even send a message to everyone that's broadcasting. You as a teacher can go into each breakout room and visit everybody. And each breakout room is having a separate conversation. So I like to explain it to teachers as if you're sending each group of students to work together to another classroom. That's what the breakout room's almost like. So you can't hear them unless you go visit them. And they can't hear you unless you're in the same room. They can still ask for help. So when the students are in a room, there's a little button that they can push that says ask for help from the teacher, and it will bring you, the teacher, back into that room. Or you can just hit later and it'll send them a message that you're helping with someone, but you'll come to them. So the breakout rooms is really, really great. And you can try it out with your PLC before you get in there with your students, but it's a great way to really replicate our small group instruction.
So just to kind of reiterate of things that you can do in a breakout room, you can, like we said, you can auto assign students to a room, or you can manually put them in there. You can change, excuse me, you can change the options that apply to that. So you can, depending on how you want to have that set up, you can set that up. Like we said, students can ask for help. So while they're in their breakout room, while they're talking and working with each other. If they have a question, they can ask for help. We get notified as the teacher that they ask for help, and then we can jump into their breakout room. And then you can also move students on the fly into different breakout rooms. So you might have assigned them to one group, but then you see that they actually maybe need to go to a different group, and then you can take that student and you can move them to a different group. So even though you have them set up a certain way, you can kind of move kids around just like we would in the classroom. You can move them around kind of on the fly. And then you can also close all the breakout rooms at once. So then you can set that up, and then they'll all close. They'll get a little timer letting them know that their breakout room is closing, and then everyone will be brought back together.
And then when you're in the meeting and you want to access like your meeting ID, your password, just the URL on the spot, in the upper left-hand corner, there's a little itty bitty eye. It's very small. If you click on it, it'll give you that information right there on the spot you can access, but also your students will be able to access this app well when they're in it.
So now we're going to talk about controlled muting by us, the teacher. So if you wanted to mute somebody, what you could do is you can click on Manage Participants, and then you'll see buttons at the bottom where it says mute all or unmute all. So if you needed to just mute everybody, you can click that mute all button. But then if you wanted to open it up again, you can unmute everybody. And then clicking on the security shield will allow you, like we said, to kind of customize settings on the fly. So if it has the checkbox, that means you're allowing them to do it. If the checkbox is not there, then they're not able to do it. So like in this example, we would be allowing them to unmute themselves. We would be allowing them to rename themselves. But if you don't want those options, make sure that they are unchecked.
So nonverbal feedback, what is that? So when visiting your zoom.us account and you click on the settings on the left-hand side, there's a setting that says nonverbal feedback. This is really great for a few reasons. We want to give our students enough ways to respond to us, whether it's verbally or through the chat or even through responses of nonverbal feedback. When you enable this, students will have options for thumbs down, thumbs up, a clapping sign, raise their hand, yes, no, go slower, go faster. But Zoom also does a wonderful thing of, if you see the example of the thumbs up, it actually registers and counts how many thumbs up there are. So this could be a really great way to know, okay, if your students are ready for you to move on, or if you're still waiting for someone, or where they are with understanding this curriculum. So it gives us a lot of different ways for our students to kind of tell us that they want us to slow down, they need a little bit more help. That way, just hitting, a thumbs up or thumbs down, it doesn't bring that much attraction to themselves as if they were raising their hand and talking in Zoom, or if they were writing in the chat. So it just gives them a lot more options for how they can communicate their needs to us in our Zoom sessions.
So like we have mentioned throughout this webinar so far, that security button is our best friend during a meeting. So if you have that security button enabled, you are able to kind of toggle on and off features in the meeting on the fly. So you can enable the waiting room. If you forgot to enable that when you started, you can enable it. You can turn on screen sharing. You can turn off screen sharing. You can turn on chat. You can turn off chat. Remember, if it's checked, that means it's enabled and you're allowing them to do it. If it's unchecked, that means that they don't have access to do those things.
So now we're going to get into how to share your Zoom link with your students. We're going to talk about a few ways, but this is not every way. These are just what some of your colleagues are doing.
So one way people are sharing the links to their Zoom meetings with their students is they're posting them in Clever on their teacher page. So when you're in Clever, when you log in at the top, you'll see your teacher page, and then you can add links to different resources. You can add links to things, and when your students log into Clever, they'll see the teacher page at the top. They can click on that teacher page, and then they have access to all the links that you share on your teacher page. So one way that teachers are sharing their Zoom link is they're putting it on their teacher page. So they go to their teacher page in Clever, and then they click on add, and then they're going to get the option to add a link. And when they click on that link, then they're going to add the link to the Zoom session, and it'll show up as a little button there, and the students can click on that and it will take them to the Zoom session.
Another way that teachers are posting their Zoom link is they're going in their Google Classroom and they're posting their Zoom link in their stream. And something to note when you're posting in your stream is a lot of teachers, they were saying, well, their stream gets cluttered up with everything that they're posting in their classwork. You can actually turn that off. And so one of our virtual PDs that Marshall and I did, we talked about how when you go to the settings button in Google Classroom, you can actually stop the stream from putting any announcements about classwork. That way the stream is strictly what you want it to be and it's just you typing to your students. No classwork actually shows up. And another option of posting to Google Classroom is at the very top. You can change your name to your classroom to also include your Zoom meeting ID and your Zoom password, the link. You can put it there and you can put it in the stream. That way it's in 2 places in Google Classroom.
So some features that we want to cover that are not accessible on a Chromebook, just so everyone is aware. So these features you cannot do if you're hosting the meeting on your Chromebook. So polling, whiteboard, annotation, and remote control. These features are not available if you were to host a meeting on your Chromebook.
So seeing all of your students, Zoom has the ability, depending on your software in your computer, to view most of your students on gallery view. So the numbers that you'll be able to see range from 26 all the way up to 49 at a time, depending on your screen and your computer's ability. But we just wanted to show you just a little example of what it would look like.
Yeah, so we saw this, and so we were thinking that everyone was going to have the ability to see 49 people at the same time. But then as we were testing on certain computers, we were noticing that depending on your computer, and like Satara said, depending on what version of Windows you have and just its capabilities, you might only be able to see 25 at a time instead of the 49. And so if you are able to only see 25, you'll see here that there's little arrows on the left and right hand side. You would just have to scroll through to see the 26 through 36 or whatever it is. But just know that if you open up gallery view and you only see 25, it's not that the other ones aren't on. It's just you might just have to scroll over to the next set to see the rest of your students.
So one more time, to ensure your Zoom session is secure, the security button enables you to lock your meeting. So if all your students are there, you can just lock it. You can enable the waiting room. You can remove participants. You can restrict your students' ability to screen share, chat, rename themselves, annotate if you accidentally turn that on and they're not on their Chromebook, because annotate doesn't work on the Chromebook for the students, but if they're on their personal device, they can, and that allows them to write all over everything you're doing. And then you can also take away your students' ability to unmute themselves. So we just wanted to, this is the last time we're going to talk about this button, but we just wanted to keep just hitting it home that this is where you would go for a lot of the things that you're going to need during the meeting.
And locking the meeting and having the waiting room are two great ways to try to ensure that you're not going to get anybody in your meeting that's not supposed to be there. So if you have 25 students and you see that all 25 are there, lock the meeting down so you're not going to get any random student trying to join your meeting. Also, if you forgot to lock it down, but you have the waiting room enabled, that's another kind of guard for you. You can look and see, okay, this student isn't in my class, so I don't need to admit them into the session. And then we just wanted to kind of share this. If you were using like an iPad that you wanted to share with your students, you can do that. So there's 2 ways to do that. So you're going to connect there's 2 ways that you can connect. I'm sorry. So you can either run the meeting from an iPad and share the screen, or you can physically connect your iPad to your computer. And then when you click on share, you're going to get the option to share your desktop. You can choose the whiteboard feature, but then here's where you would click the iPad or iPhone, and then it would be able to mirror what's on the iPad as well. So I know some of our speech and language pathologists and stuff, they have district iPads, so we just wanted to kind of cover that just in case they were in here as well.
And then the Zoom whiteboard feature, for The Zoom whiteboard feature, you want to make sure that first it's enabled in your settings. So you want to go to zoom.us. On the left-hand side, click settings, and you want to enable the whiteboard. During the Zoom meeting, to get the whiteboard, you'll want to hit screen share and then go to the whiteboard. The whiteboard is only for teacher use, and it won't work on your Chromebook. So if you are using your Chromebook as a teacher, you won't be able to use Zoom's whiteboard. If you want your students to write on it, they won't be able to. But the whiteboard is a feature that you can pull up to show different examples. And if you wanted to use a whiteboard collaboratively with your students, that could be where you use Jamboard, which is found in your waffle in Google. So it's one of the whiteboard features that Google has. And then you would just share your screen and go to Jamboard, share that Jamboard with your students. And that's a way to do a little interactive whiteboard. But the Zoom whiteboard only works for the teacher, and it does not work on the Chromebook.
And so like we talked about, if you were to use the whiteboard feature in Zoom, when you go to share your screen, you're going to click on that green share button. And then instead of choosing one of your monitors or one of your screens, you're going to choose the whiteboard. And then that's going to enable Zoom's built-in whiteboard feature.
And then here are some tools when you use your whiteboard. So you can add text, you can draw freehand or shapes, you can add different stamps, you can highlight, change colors, add different pages on the whiteboard. You can put examples and have the students walk you through, okay, which sentence is correct, which is the noun, the one with the star, the one with the circle. So there's different ways that you could use the whiteboard.
And then when you are in your whiteboard, you can create parallel lines, you can create intersecting lines, you can create perpendicular lines. Those are just some of the other tools. You can add shapes, like we said, stars, check marks, question marks. Those types of things can be added using Zoom's whiteboard feature.
So how to hold meetings when you need to be in two places at once. And we put this in here because we've gotten some emails, especially from our special ed teachers who have an IEP going on at the same time that they need to be in their classroom. So how can they be in two places at once? And the best suggestion that we're able to give is you'll need to have two devices, and you'll want to make sure that you are muted on Zoom on one device, and also on that same device, the computer is muted as well. So you're going to be on two separate meetings, two separate devices, and one has to be on mute within Zoom and on the computer itself. Otherwise, you're going to get feedback. So sometimes if you guys are working in the same room with your PLC and you're hearing this feedback and echoing, it's because you're going to need to mute within Zoom and mute the computer as well. But that's just so that if you're like proctoring an exam, you can see the students that are taking that exam, but then you can still be communicating over here on the other side within your meeting. So things are changing, and it's hard to be in two places at once, but we're just trying to find answers together on ways that we can make this work.
And then I know some other teachers have also talked about doing small groups while having a whole group at the same time. So another option is to do that instead of using something like a breakout room, so they can still see their whole class working on like independent work, but then they could be on a separate device working with this specific kind of small group of students too.
And for those of you that are working from home using two computers or two laptops and you're not able to have dual screen, when using two devices, there is a way to see your students. So right here, we're talking about using two devices within the same meeting. So you're using two devices, you're in the meeting twice, and you're using one device to share your screen from and the other to see your students. If you're sharing your screen from one and you're in the meeting on your other screen as well, you're gonna see what you're sharing. But I keep calling it an invisible line because I can't see it. There's an invisible line, but Marshall told me that there's like two white dots. You might even have it on this webinar right now. And so there's two white dots. And if you see that, you can click on it and you can drag it over, and it will make your students' faces larger. That way you can see them more instead of the screen that is being shared. So that's just a really great tool to work and to use, especially if you're using two separate computers within the same meeting, or you're working from home, you don't have access to dual screens, or you just want to see some images a little bigger.
So sharing with two monitors. So we're going to kind of walk you through that to see what that setup looks like. So this would be one screen. So I'm going to click on my green share button, and then I'm going to choose the window or the tab that I want to share. And then now that window or tab becomes the more prominent one on that screen. On the other screen, you'll see after you click that green share button and then you choose the screen that you want to share, you'll notice that now your participants show up on that other screen. So that now you can kind of drag them around and you can have your students on one screen, but then what you're sharing on the other screen. So then this is what it would kind of look like. You would see your screen sharing on one side, but then you can put your participants, which would be your students, you can put them on the second screen.
And when you are sharing your screen to play videos or small clips from your screen, you want to share your computer sound. And so this is different than when we're just talking to each other over Zoom. So you have to actually share the internal sound from the computer. Otherwise, the students won't be able to hear the sound from that video or the clip that you're showing them. So when you open up and you click on the green button that says share, this screen will come up. There's the tiniest little box all the way in the corner that you can't see. That's the most important. And of course, they put it really tiny, that you're going to want to check where it says share computer sound. That's really important. Otherwise, you're going to share a video and your students are going to tell you that they can't hear anything. And you're going to end up just turning your speakers up really loud and then using your headphones that way. But if you just hit share computer sound, then you can still talk to them and they can also hear the video and the sound that's happening from your computer.
And I'll need to double check this, but I feel like once you enable that, I'm trying to think if you have to click that every time or if like once you click it, it stays on. I don't remember.
I'm not sure.
So if you wanted to share your screen, but you wanted to use your document camera, what you can do is, one way is you can do it right within Zoom's sharing feature. So I click on that green share button, and then I'm going to go over to advanced, and I'm going to choose my document camera. And then instead of sharing my screen, it's going to share from my document camera. Another way that I can do it is I can just share the screen and I have my document camera window open. And if I drag that onto the screen, then it'll show what's on my document camera as well. But this is a way that you can share just straight directly from the document camera.
And then using your dual screens, you want to always make sure that you have your participant window and your chat windows open, especially when you're sharing. If you have them open before you were sharing, when you go to share your screen, they'll disappear. And you're going to have to re-click on the participant and the chat icons to make them open up, and then you'll want to drag them over to the side. So just always make sure you have those open and that you can see your students. You can see if anyone's in the waiting room, and you can see if there's any discussions or any questions that are happening in the chat that you also need to get to.
And then we wanted to talk about also reports and talking about meeting usage. So Zoom allows you to access reports for meeting attendance. So what you can do is it'll show you the participants that are in there. It'll show you when they logged in, when they logged out, the duration of how long they were in that meeting for. So if you're, for our secondary, if you're holding a meeting and it's supposed to be 45 minutes long, you can look and see, okay, this person checked in on time, but they were only present for 30 minutes because they left early. What you will also see, which Sitar and I discovered this morning, is you'll notice that the picture on the left, my email is in there twice. And we determined that that is because it's counting the time that I was in the waiting room and then the time that I was actually in the class. So to kind of consolidate this and make it where you're not seeing a bunch of duplicates, if you click on where it says show unique users on the right hand side, now it grouped all of my kind of records into one. So now instead of showing that I was in there for a minute in the waiting room and then I was in there for 9 minutes in the class, it's going to show me that I was in there for a total of 10 minutes. So then when you export that, instead of having a bunch of duplicates, it's going to group everything together. So it's going to be a lot less duplicate results and stuff in there. So then you can export this, and then you can clearly see who was in there, how long they were in there for, and then you can use that as a way to kind of gauge attendance as well.
And then you'll get to all these reports from your settings. So you'll want to go to zoom.us, and then reports tab will be right there, and you'll want to click on that, and that's how you'll get to everything. So we keep saying your zoom.us account, not the app, because it seems like everything that we need to do with Zoom is from their actual website webpage, zoom.us. And the app is just, once you have everything scheduled and good to go, that's where you can just start your meetings from.
And then again, we just wanted to reiterate that if you haven't received your activation for your TUSD Zoom account, check your TUSD Gmail account. If it didn't get sent there and you're not receiving it, just let us know, and we can kind of look into that for you. But because it's associated with your TUSD Google email address, then those invitations got sent to that email account.